Good morning. For those of you I have not met, I am Bob Nuxall. This morning, Betty Nuxall and I are serving as worship assistants. As a Unitarian Universalist congregation, we gather in worship to reflect upon matters of ultimate concern in our lives. We gather in reference to the mystery of life, to deepen our awareness of who we are and what we hold most dear, and to discern our unique way of serving the needs of our larger world. If you are a newcomer or are visiting with us today, know that we are glad to see you here. After the service, we hope that you will introduce yourself to us and that you will take the time to visit our welcome table in the lobby. If you would like more information about our congregation or Unitarian Universalism, we invite you to complete one of the blue visitor information cards, which are on the pew racks. Once completed, that card may be turned in at the welcome desk or placed in the offering plate when our collection is taken. Immediately after this morning's service, we will reconvene in the social hall, just across the lobby, for coffee and conversation at our UU Cafe, where lunch can be purchased at a modest price. If you are here for the first time, we hope that you will allow us to treat you to lunch. Please stop by the welcome table to receive your guest ticket for the UU Cafe. And now, before we enter our service, I have a few announcements to share with you. While I do, I invite you to take this time to turn off your cell phones and electronic devices. Please. In your order of service, you will find a list of many of the activities up today and the next week. May I add some other things? Our summer concert will be on Sunday, August 4th. Volunteers are needed for that event. Contact Richard Bach. A week later, on the 11th, after the service, Ned will host a fireside chat where he will discuss his final report to the congregation, which you can access online, or you can get a hard copy by contacting Jen Sapel in our office. See the quest for more details. Also, volunteers are much needed for service on the MRC, that is, the Members Resource Committee. Contact Tammy Weil if you are interested. Finally, before I invite you to greet one another, I have the pleasure of introducing to you our guest speaker, Jake Hearen. Jake, though originally from Austin, Texas, spent most of the past 15 years in and around the South Salish Sea while serving in the military and continuing his education. So what and where is the South Salish Sea? It's the waters in and around Vancouver and Seattle, partly in the state of Washington and partly in British Columbia. As an aspirant for the UU ministry, he was supported by the nearby Tahoma Unitarian Universalist congregation. He now attends Union Theological Seminary in New York City. This fall, he will serve as the field education seminarian at the Community Church of New York, in addition to serving as a chaplain candidate with the Army Reserve Unit in Fort Totten. Thank you, Jake, for being with us today. And now I invite you to greet those around you, introducing yourselves to those you do not yet know.
Not a problem. The Salish Seas.
They've been using that term.
As long as I've lived in Washington.
So it's like an internal waterway, like they have in Alaska.
it covers, it's like the Puget Sound area, but then it's also covers a little bit more. So you'll hear South Salish or South Sound interchangeably, pretty much. So Seattle all the way down to the Butte kind of area.
Yeah, we have distant relatives there, but I've never heard the term from them.
Oh yeah.
Or the Maxwells of the world that originated in a particular town in Germany. They found each other on the internet. So. Whereas Western Wave moved back to something they never heard before.
Our opening words come from then Lieutenant Colonel Mark Smith, a professor at West Point. It's a poem he wrote for their annual powwow called But Which Race Shall I Be Called? But which race shall I be called? The recorder says white, yellow, red, black. But I have two parents. The recorder says white, yellow, red, black. But my parents are from different heritage. The recorder says white, yellow, red, black. But which race shall I be called? The recorder says whichever is darker. That which is darker, I am called.
We hallow this time together by kindling the flame of our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. We add in the words of Christine Robinson,
We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light our chalice, beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. I invite you now to join in singing hymn number 323, Break Not This Chalice, in the gray hymnal. Please stand as you are able.
I invite you to remain standing and join in our words of affirmation printed in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need, this do we affirm and covenant with each other. You may be seated.
Our congregation is a living entity, and like all living things, in order to thrive, it must have proper sustenance and nurture. Its breath and its heartbeat, its life force, are derived from its living components, us. Our congregation thrives and grows only with our care and tending, with the life and energy and resources we provide. An offering will now be made in support of the congregation we love and sustain together. May the sharing of our gifts serve to deepen our commitments to this faith, which has enriched our living and offers a message of hope for our world. Will the ushers please come forward? I invite any who would like to light candles of joy or sorrow to come forward now in the quiet of this moment, as all of us join them in silence, focusing our intentions on these candles of celebration and concern.
My bad. So the reading today has been taken from it's called the theme section of examining the lived experiences of Native American students at predominantly white institutions. And it was written by a graduate student, an indigenous identifying graduate student at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and it's in the area of educational administration. And he's hoping that the study, which focuses most exclusively on three individuals because they had the greatest intersection of all the themes that were presented, that this will help other indigenous students at secondary and higher education institutions. What he discovered was that although not all participants lived on their respective tribal reservations, they still experienced many of the stereotypes faced by Native Americans. 2 of the 3 participants know that due to light complexion of their skin tone, they faced a whole different set of stereotypes from people of color as well as white individuals. These Native American students, participants navigated through their education experience and faced institutional and campus community racism. As a result, many of the participants felt as though their identities were in conflict with the institution and its values, no matter how positive they might be. And there's a lack of awareness around the intersectionality of different social identities, including what it is to be Native American today. When they tried to present their truest self, they were confronted or even corrected, and it questioned, is it even worth it to anymore, or I'm just too tired? And some of the students felt that once they presented themselves, there was either being ignored or you are the token native. There is no in between. It is presented in such a way that you wouldn't do this with any other racial context. A number of the students, after a number of harassing situations, students continue to question whether even to mention this in class, seeing if that it would add to anything. What they found is that they just tried to be that one student. I'm just here to learn. I don't want to be singled out or put on a pedestal. So what was an attempt to be inclusive of who they originally are, as well as fitting into the broader community, stereotypes led to isolation and prevented belongingness. The students that actually found the most belonging are the ones that had many feet across all different parts of campus, whether that was the resident housing or whether that was the LGBT community. One particular student named Chelsea throughout the survey noted that she felt particularly isolated because she was treated as a collector's item in an academic study setting because she was in a graduate program pursuing a PhD and had to be fully invested primarily in the academic setting. And other people looked at her and said that you're just filling a quota. And this has been something that has been systemic of Native American education. Another student named Shelley was recruited by the student government to represent the Native voice on campus and actually invested a lot of energy in reinforcing the Native American student organization. Unfortunately, she quickly felt that she was burned out, and while she did promote the Native voice, she no longer could carry it and had to let other people champion the causes. So these feelings of isolation that are because of stereotypes led to questions of belonging and whether they could actually feel a part of the greater institution, despite how the institution itself tries to level the playing field across all the various types of person that we can be or that we will become. And students felt that they had left a very particular type of structured lifestyle to join in higher education and found that some of their cultural norms and what they had experienced growing up were not meant to be in this situation, and that they would have to be tabled for when they were home on holidays or after they had graduated. And many of the students felt that everything that they experienced really made them question exactly what it is that they are trying to pursue. So at this moment, I want you to take a moment, silent reflection, everything that has happened to you during this coming week, everything that you've seen, heard, experienced, and everything that you know is about to come during the next week, 2 month, and settle into that feeling, that knowing, and also that anticipation that something will change, that something will not happen as it's supposed to. And I would like you to settle there for a moment before we begin the sermon.
often and silently come where you are, that I may be with you. As I walk by your side, or sit near, or remain in the same room with you, little you know the subtle electric fire that for your sake is playing within me.
So, no matter how you consume your news today, between physical newspapers, television broadcasts, or the internet, you're likely to hear something about the application of the U.S. immigration policy. When I have the chance, I open the Mainichi Shimbun or turn on NHK. It's a practical method for maintaining my Japanese, which I don't think is actually helping. It also gives me an external perspective of these particular issues. Given what we do know, we could undoubtedly receive near unanimous response if we polled the room right now about what is occurring, what needs to change, and what we need to cease entirely. Those that don't join in our dissent are probably daydreaming about lunch, and I join you in that. Something that I was reminded of on Facebook, of all places, was that such atrocities have often been legally sanctioned by the governments where these events take place. Smaller acts of prejudice are themselves encouraged by the social and cultural paradigm. What makes this so damaging is that these actions are usually done in the name of love, be it the love that compels us to protect those whom we care about, or that we insist on sharing our particular understanding and expression of love in such a way that it harms others. It beckons us to re-examine love, a concept that is in the top 5, if not the most referenced throughout all of Unitarian Universalism. At its basis level, I know throughout school, love came up from time to time, and it was not until college when I actually took a class about language policy. Early in the class, we read an article about the peculiarities of some languages, such as the inability to naturally distinguish between blue and green, but possess several very unique terms for shades like sky blue and dark blue. All of this came to a conclusion around the understanding of love in English. There is no simple expression for the word love and all of its terms, such as the love felt for a family member versus the love I share with some of my colleagues. Like shades of blue, we require classification and justification to clarify and accurately describe the love that we are trying to convey. Inevitably, these descriptors are dropped because we believe that we have shared an understanding about the particular love that is being conveyed, and everybody's on the same page. But this is the same problem that generations from bygone until now have committed. They use the catch-all love without regard whether there was an actual consensus on its usage or that it was even safe to use in the first place. My seminary, as much as its claim is to be diverse and a multi-faith organization, is still inherently a Christian institution and requires us to preach from that perspective from time to time. During my worship class's final project, curating a service, ritual, songs, everything, another UU and I selected from a prescribed list a passage from the book of Isaiah. It was about who should live in a house that's been built, who should eat from the garden, if the church could stand in for the house and faith were to be reaped from a garden. I related snippets of stories about how one of my great uncles was dragged away from his family by his braid to attend one of the Indian boarding schools because a minister did it out of love. Things like this love to protect other of the Wajija, the European Americans, from our savage ways, as well as to reform us from what we could, finally receive what is known as agape in Latin, or God's love. For those that were able to join us in Spokane this year, or at least watched the telecast, you probably heard a lot about love. I know I did. I didn't grow up as a UU, at least not in the usual sense. I had a few UU friends over the years, and the RE at a program at a church that my dad was rewiring actually led me to my serious study of Buddhism. But from the perspective of UUism, I'm essentially reborn. So as somebody who's still relatively new to this tradition, I do everything with wide-eyed amazement, and everything is all shiny and new. So this means that I'm still kind of processing everything that happened in Spokane. I'm still trying to figure out where it fits into our theological infrastructure, if you will. And one thing that I've been thinking about is the 25-year celebration sermon that was part of the ministry days. If anybody actually watched that, it's still available online. And one of the things that the minister mentioned, both in the reading and the sermon, was about the saying, "Love is the doctrine of our church." So I'm seeking an understanding in how a community that has used the metaphor of overcoming the Canaanites as justification for the decimation of indigenous communities throughout Massachusetts can claim that love is the doctrine of their church. For a group that seeks to affirm those whose voices have been silenced, I'm curious why it took a Wajija teenager to stand up there in the Grand Assembly Hall and highlight how recent resolutions supported everyone but indigenous people. I'm not even going to delve into the attitudes expressed to me about my military service, both as humanitarian aid as well as now a military chaplain. No, what I've actually climbed up here on the pulpit is, and trying to convey in the broadest sense that I can use the word we, because I'm trying to broaden this as much as I can, is that we've kind of gone a little too long to actually understand what we really mean by love. And that we just kind of throw it out from time to time without any true, deep, 20 feet in the ground, all the way across the world, understanding of what we mean by love. It's the same love that erases our peers in society and prevents some of our friends from feeling safe in the groups where they belong, or the groups that they even created to begin with. there's popular sayings in at least in American English. I'm not sure about across the world, but as far as the road to hell is paved with good intentions, the most horrible things in the history of this planet have been accomplished in the name of love, but some of the greatest things as well. So when we start talking about how love is the doctrine of our church, we need to be aware of what that original context was, who first championed it, and how it has changed over time, who is included, who is excluded, and who we are targeting. So, now, if you will please join me in body or spirit, singing our closing hymn, number 1017, Building a New Way. It is found in the Teal hymnal. So our closing words today come from an article written by Doyle V. Robertson, Trans-Sisseton, Dakota. Most of my experience of being Native in America is not being Native. I am not unique in that experience, but I am clear in how it has impacted me.